The Brexit hypocrisy continues. This morning on Sky, Trevor Phillips' Sunday Morning, we had Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Billionaire, who was an enormous supporter of Brexit, came out before the Brexit vote and said Britain didn't need to be ruled by Europe and it was costly and we'd be much better off on our own and, you know, things would be la-di-da. And of course, once Theresa May triggered Article 50, Sir Jim decided to move his production to Europe because it was such a fantastic offer, an opportunity too good to turn down, apparently. And then he went and settled in Monaco to save tax. So here he is back on our screens this Sunday, telling us that the reason Brexit actually came about was because of immigration, and that Brexit has now failed, he says, because it's failed to stop immigration because this island was only designed, he thinks, for 55 million people. I'm not quite sure who has the plans for Britain and how many people it's supposedly able to support, but interesting that he said that nonetheless. And managed to keep a straight face, but I did notice at one stage he started staring at the floor.
And he's known as a big supporter of Brexit and the Conservatives. But in an exclusive interview for Sky News, he sounds pretty unimpressed with both, saying he gets why the country feels ready for a change of government. He was speaking to Sky's Rob Harris.
You were saying a few months ago that you think this current government has been sort of damaging for business. You were with Sir Keir Starmer last weekend. Do you have more optimism that for Ineos, the Labour government would be better?
I'm sure Keir will do a very good job of running the country. I've no questions about that. I think the UK does need to get a bit sharper on the business front, and I think the government needs, I think the biggest objective for the government is to create growth in the economy. And, there's two parts of the economy. There's the services side of the economy and there's the manufacturing side. And the manufacturing, unfortunately, has been sliding away now for the last 25 years. We were very similar in scale to Germany probably 25 years ago, but today we're just a fraction of where Germany is. And I think that isn't healthy for the British economy because, and particularly when you think the north of England is very manufacturing based. And, that talks to things like energy competitiveness. It talks to things like, why do you put an immensely high tax on the North Sea when what you want, that just disincentivises people from finding hydrocarbons in the North Sea and energy. And what we need is competitive energy. So, why in America, in the energy world, in the oil and gas world, they just apply corporation tax to the oil and gas companies, which is about 30%. And in the UK, we've got this tax of 75%, because we want to kill off the oil and gas companies. But if we don't have competitive energy, we're not going to have a healthy manufacturing industry. And that just makes no sense to me at all. None.
So, you are representing Britain in part with this America's Cup Challenge. You're using Britannia. So, what do you think would be best for the country in this election year in terms of...
Oh, I think. In my view, there's no question that the Conservatives have had they've had a good run, over the last, probably 15, 20 years. And I think most of the country probably feels it's time for a change, and I sort of get that, really.
Are you going to fund some of that change? Invest in Labour?
I've got lots to do. No, we're apolitical at Ineos, We just want a successful manufacturing sector in the UK. We'll talk to either government about that.
Has Brexit impacted
we're quite
that?
Clear about our views.
Has Brexit impacted that?
Well, Brexit sort of unfortunately didn't turn out as people anticipated because we didn't really, Brexit was, largely about immigration. That was the biggest component of that vote. People were getting fed up with the influx of, the city of Southampton coming in every year. I think last year it was 2 times Southampton. A small island like the UK can't cope with vast numbers of people coming into the UK. It just overburdens the National Health Service, the traffic service, the police, everybody. They can't. The country was designed for 55 or 60 million people, and we've got 70 million people, and all the services break down as a consequence. So that's what Brexit was all about, and nobody's implemented that. they just keep talking about it, but nothing's been done, which is why I think we'll finish up with a change of government, to be honest.
All that Sir Jim Ratcliffe has said makes no sense. His previous contributions to Brexit don't tie up with what he's now trying to say are the reasons for Brexit failing. But irrespective of that, all of the Brexit economists, and there weren't many of them, Patrick Minford was number one, explained that Brexit meant running down manufacturing. So all that Sir Jim has said makes no sense, and his actions subsequently make no sense. He's trying to make out that Brexit hasn't been properly implemented in some way, and he's blaming the fact that immigration hasn't been stopped as the reason for its failure. But we know that the reason for Brexit's failure is because of the ridiculous trade barriers, which is obviously why he decided to move his production facilities within the single market, and all the other associated problems with Brexit, loss of freedom of movement, the bad trade deals, which mean that lower standard products can come in and undercut us here. Food and farming it still is Britain's largest manufacturing sector. It's shrinking by the day, and this is why I particularly am concerned about it, because with every day we get weaker. A country that can't feed itself is not really a country, because you then become a colony as such, of a bigger country who has control of your food. And that is really the most uncomfortable thing, because food security is national security, and that's why it's so critical that we do something about Brexit to ensure that we can shore up food production and also get rid of the trade barriers, because part of our food system relies on imports, primarily food imports from Europe. Yes, we do get food imports from further afield, particularly for goods that we don't grow here in Europe. But essentially, food is a commodity where really distance matters, because food goes off. And that's why it's so critical. So I so wish I could sit down and have a discussion with people like Sir Jim and all of the other Brexit blackguards, because ultimately they're now in a position of having to say that Brexit isn't working, despite the fact they said it was going to be marvellous for Britain. I mean, why don't they just tell the truth instead of lying to us more and trying to make it all about immigration, which is so misleading and just deflecting? So here I am with Daisy, number one favourite cow, Daisy. There she is. She's very much the head cow. She organises all of the herd and bosses everyone around. She hasn't had her calf yet. She's normally too busy bossing people around to get in calf. Ultimately, British farming has been contracting for a number of years, and mainly to do with the fact of the rise of supermarkets, and that the governments successive governments continue to give the supermarkets preferential treatment, a monopoly really. And so all of the protections that we had in place, there was a thing called the Resale Price Maintenance Act, which the Conservatives repealed in 1964. Thatcher got rid of the Milk Marketing Board, all of these things which helped protect farmers, and their prices, their farm gate prices, have gone. So we're left for the supermarkets to feast on. When we had when we were in the European CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, there was a buffer, but now English farmers have practically lost all of that, and we're being pushed into environmental schemes. But the other problems that we have are associated with Brexit. Brexit opening up the floodgates to cheaper imports, Brexit removing freedom of movement and our labour source, Brexit removing free trade for our exports to our biggest market. Most of our exports went to Europe before Brexit, and it's still pretty much the case. It's just that we're exporting a lot less now because of Brexit, and we've got more cheaper imports coming in. When I say cheaper, though, the reason they're cheaper is because they're lower standards. They're using methods and chemicals and so forth which we're not allowed to here, and they don't have the same standards for looking after the farm. We get regular farm inspections. All of these things have meant that farming is really, really pushed, but also we have legislation now for farming which turns us into park keepers. So we're having to take land out of production to exist, and it's all of those complications really that are causing the problems. And then on top of that, we've got real problems with climate change, and we sort of seem to be going from drought to extreme flooding year on year. And what do we want as a campaign? Well, we'd like to have something like the Resale Press Maintenance Act come back in to protect us from middlemen paying beneath the cost of production. We'd also like to have free trade back with our biggest market, and we'd like to get out of these bad trade deals, which are cataclysmic over a period of time. The Australia deal in particular for beef, which is what we farm here. And so in an ideal world, rejoining the single market and customs union would be by far the best solution, but we still need to get a proper food plan and a proper production system that we are incentivised to produce food as well as look after the environment. It is possible to do both. Anyway, I got to get on, and hope you've enjoyed seeing some of Daisy.